Okay, so we'll start with UniApp 07. Remember, UniApp is the software that broadcasts to a bunch of users at the university. And this time, we're going to store all the data for our UniApp in two CSV files. So in previous examples, it's all been stored in a Python file, which obviously isn't very practical if you've got thousands of users because you'd have to type them all in. So instead, we'll put them in a CSV file, and that might come from a database system or something. So there's two CSV files. In fact, people.csv is a list of users. Modules.csv is a list of which users are attached to which modules. And for each of those, there's a Python file which reads the file in as a list of strings, so one for each row in the CSV files. It inspects the first row and uses it as column headers, and then processes the rest of the rows to create users and attach them to modules. So let's have a look at those files first of all. So here's the folder. We've got two files there. People, let's have a look at the people one first. If I double click on that, it will just open up in Excel on my machine anyway. And you can see the first row is the column headers, so name, type, user ID, job. And then underneath that, there's all the data. So for example, Bobby is a type, is a user, and the user ID is Bob01. Chris staff, user ID, Chris02, and job is lecturer. Okay, but this, as I said, is just a text file. So I can also open it up in Notepad. So the most basic text editor we've got, Notepad, and you can see there's the same data. It's just that now everything is stored just as text with commas between each value. And so Excel knows how to turn that into a spreadsheet because it treats that as a row of data with some empty values there. Okay, that's the files. Let's have a look at how we process them. So this database 07 version of the code doesn't, as previously, all this stuff was hard-coded in the database. Now, what it does is reads in a file. And the way it does that is, first of all, it reads in the contents of the file, people.csv, using this Readlines function. We have encountered that before. All that does is reads the file, opens the file, and reads every line in as a separate string in a list. Okay, and then to find out what the headers are, so if you remember the first row of this file has column headers, name, type, user. To find out what they are, the list of contents is taken, and the first row of that list is popped from the list. So pop means you just remove it from the list. So we've then got that as a string, which we can then strip. That just removes any leading and trailing space. There shouldn't be anybody, just in case. And then we split it at every comma. So it splits it into another list. So it takes this one row, which would be this line of text here, split it into what's that? 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fields, and then it parses those fields by checking. It looks through that list of fields and identifies which column they're in. So name would be in column 0. Okay, type would be in column 1. So it's just setting what these values are for name column, type column, user column, job column, program column, which should be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if the users rearranged the file or something, or added some extra columns, then this will still work. Finally, it takes the rest of the list of rows, so all the rest of the data that we've got here, and it reads each one in at a time. So it takes the row from the contents, each row one at a time, splits it into its individual cells, and then gets the information from each cell. And then it looks at what type of user that is by looking at the type information, which is these details here: the person, user, staff, student, and then creates the appropriate type of user, maybe a person or a user. Remember, a person is just a guest, doesn't have a user ID. A user has a user ID. Staff has user ID in the job. Student has user ID in a program. Okay, it's able to figure all that out from the spreadsheet, and it can add the user then to the list. So it creates that user and adds the user to the list. For the modules, that's a similar file. Let me show you that file. In fact, I'm going to show you it in PyCharm. I can also open these files up in PyCharm. So if I open up modules, there you'll see a module just has two columns. First column is the user ID, and the second column is the module. Okay. And if you're familiar with the concept of databases, you'll see that neither of these things are unique. So there's no primary key here. Okay. You can see that ed04 appears in 3 rows, and UG1234 appears in 1, 2, 3, possibly some more, at least 3 rows. So this is a many-to-many relationship between user IDs and modules. Okay, what do we do with that? We do exactly the same procedure. So the code gets the first row, checks which column each field is in. So is it the user ID? Is that in column 0? The module is in column 1. I think looking at this example, user ID is column 0, module is column 1, and then it goes through the rest of the data, processing each data and processing each row, getting the user ID in the module from that row, and once it's found a user ID, it looks through all the users to try and find that user. If that user is a member of staff or a student, then that user will have a modules attribute, which is a list of modules that they're attached to. So then if the code finds that user and finds that they're a member, they're a staff or a student object, it can say that it's found, and then it adds the module to the user's list of modules. There is a possibility that it might not be found, so it might not find the user, or it might not find the user. The user might not be a member of staff or a student, in which case it would just say not found in users. Okay, so far so good. And then when we run that, the output should be just the same as before. It's just that now all the stuff is in the data files rather than being hard coded in the database. So if I run this example, Control-Shift F10. You'll see it reads them all in. It prints out all the users that it's found, and now I can select, say, all the users on UG1234 and send them a message, just the same as before. So the rest of the code is unchanged. It's just that now, instead of as in the previous versions, let's find a previous version. There's the Uni app. The database had all the information hard coded into the database. In this new version, it's in the CSV files. Okay, just a mention about CSV files. This is actually a very common requirement. It's quite common to have to read in CSV files from Python or even Excel spreadsheets. And in fact, there's a built-in module called CSV which can assist with reading them. However, I thought it was quite instructive to see how that would be done, so I've created this example here. And if you're working in data science or information visualization, then there's a commonly used module called Pandas, which is specifically designed for manipulating this kind of data. So it reads in CSV files or Excel spreadsheets as a table of columns and rows, and then you can process it. But again, that's beyond the scope of what we're trying to do here. Okay, let me finish that video there, and then we'll see what happens when one of those files disappears.